you see pictures of him with like a bloody knife, dressed as a clown, like drawings or whatever. He never killed anyone dressed as a clown, as far as we know. He didn't use the clown character to lure boys back to his house. It was one of his masks to kind of just blend into normal society.
I'm David Thompson with The Direct. It's a pleasure to be with you both today. Congratulations on the series. Michael, starting with you, of course,
Yeah.
portraying John Wayne Gacy comes with, I would imagine, a bit of an enormous weight to it, given the popularity, I suppose, or just like the knowledge around it, and of course, the acts. How did you kind of balance the humanization of the character while also, portraying him truthfully, but not leaning too much into, say, sympathy or glorification?
Yeah, that is kind of the question, right? I mean, that was something I struggled with a lot early on and something Patrick and I talked about a bunch. Um, I certainly didn't want to glorify him or draw any more attention to him than has already been given. But in order to fulfill the larger purpose of our show, which is shining light on the victims and the victims' families, I had to embody him fully. And by all accounts, he was a very likable, charming, gregarious kind of guy and was very much involved in local politics and a very social figure. And so I had to get to a point where I had to risk him being likable on screen until he isn't. And Patrick eventually said to me, that's how we understand why these young men and boys got into his car or took that job at his construction company, because he was non-threatening and because he was funny and he seemed like a good time. Um, and it's how he got away with it for so long, how he was hiding in plain sight. And so eventually, a hope is that maybe the audience experiences that very thing. They sort of are drawn into him and think, oh, he's likable. And then they realize when the mask drops that, oh no, he's evil.
Great, thank you. Patrick, for you, there's a great balance in the series in terms of what it seems like kind of a great respect towards the victims and the victims' family. What was it like balancing that with the fictionalization? From what I understand, there was a lot of kind of unknown when it came to some characters in the series, from their real life counterparts. So what was that kind of balancing act like?
Well, first of all, we began with research. And again, I want to be clear. It's inspired by, it's a dramatization. There's no question there. We don't know what the conversations that were had behind closed doors could possibly have been, but we absolutely, between the amount of research that NBC News had done for their documentary, which became sort of the foundation for everything that we did, then I have this beautiful, beautiful researcher who I work with. I've worked with on like 6 shows, who does a very deep dive into everything that we're looking for. And so between the NBC News research and our private research, we were able to get at least a framework of an understanding of these people's lives. Sometimes there were things that came out of depositions or the trial transcripts that we were able to sort of pick pieces of the puzzle away and then build the stories off of there. Make no mistake, it's a dramatization, but it is absolutely done with a great deal of care towards trying to at least achieve the spirit of who these young boys and young men were, who these families were, what they went through. And then at the end of the day, I was having a conversation with somebody earlier about the fact that at the end of the day, part of your job, part of our jobs, is to have empathy and to figure out what the human condition is really about and where we would be if we were in their position. So quite a bit of the storytelling also came from just us trying to imagine ourselves in that situation, but it was all rooted foundationally, ultimately in the research that we did.
Great, thank you. This could be a question for both of you, if you like. I'm curious. Obviously, John Wayne Gacy, not only, documentaries, but other iterations of this story. There's so much kind of lore behind it, kind of for lack of a better word. What do you want this series to add to that? Like, what do you think this series is, you know, point might be the wrong way of saying it, but just like, what is the thing that audiences are going to leave this series thinking, wow, like I really learned something and I'm feeling a certain way about this now.
For me, a goal is to take away from that lore, to stop the like glorification of him. I think one of the missteps over the years and all the different forms of media that have been made about him is depicting him as this clown, that, you know, you see pictures of him with like a bloody knife, dressed as a clown, like drawings or whatever. He never killed anyone dressed as a clown, as far as we know. He didn't use the clown character to lure boys back to his house. It was one of his masks to kind of just blend into normal society. And if anything, I want to add to this story or this case or this moment in American history is to take away the focus from John Gacy, who really was not an interesting person in the least, and move the focus towards the victims and their families and the police officers who solved the case and the town of Chicago that was, you know, was decimated by this. The whole city's hearts were broken by this story. The country's heart was broken. Take the focus off of him and move it where it should be for once.
You echo those statements, Patrick, I assume.
I mean, 1,000%. That's genuinely the point of the show. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why we made the show. And if I can add anything, I would say that so much of what I've done in the past and so much of what the show is about is also about the systemic failure that allowed this to happen, and how Chicago police had multiple opportunities to be able to stop him over the years and put the pieces together. But on the flip side of that coin, and I really, really want to make a point of this, we're not demonizing the police. We are absolutely also lauding the other police that had been in the pit for months, had gone out, you know, dedicated their lives, and many of them sort of destroyed their lives over this case in order to try to identify every victim and bring a name to every victim. And so, and out of that, I think that people have to realize that this is a very relevant story, that just because it took place 45, 50 years ago, the same prejudices that allowed for John Wayne Gacy to get away with what he got away with still are very, very relevant today and prevalent today.
And the case continues to this day. The Chicago police are still trying to identify the unidentified victims. There are still a number of victims who we don't know their names. And the police are still actively trying to bring names to those boys and young men.
Yeah. Thank you. I think the show does a great job. Michael, on my way out, anything for Severance season 3? Our audience is dying to get any kind of inkling.
Yeah, me too.
I wish I knew. I wish I knew. That's not me. Like, that's not an NDA talking. I don't know. They don't tell me anything.
No start date for Roland?
I don't know.
Thank you. I really appreciate both of you. It's been a pleasure. So my first question is just basically, you know, your character as a mother represents so much anguish that so many parents affected have gone through from real life violence. How did you kind of prepare for that responsibility heading into this series?
Yeah, you know, one thing that I did was I read a lot of memoirs and accounts of people who have lost children. And I haven't lost a child. I've experienced grief in other ways and lost other family members, but I haven't lost a child. And I really felt like that was a responsibility that I was tasked with in a lot of ways. So I read a lot of accounts, first-person accounts of people who lost a child or someone, a loved one, very suddenly. It's such a particular and terrifying experience. So I felt like that was the personal responsibility I was carrying.
I'm curious when watching the series all the way through and how it, you know, it tells such different parts timeline wise of the process of grief. And I was wondering, beyond grief, what did you kind of want to bring to this role when representing these characters?
I mean, I think that I was really, I was thinking a lot about, well, who was this woman before? In the same way they were trying to think about the victims in their lives before. And thinking about what her journey of her life had been and continued to be, and maybe what other things she learned about herself through this process. She certainly developed a different sense of her own agency, and she and her husband, certainly their lives went in different directions. And I think that some things she discovered that she felt were important in her life as a result of that, and her other children, how she bonded with them in different ways in terms of how they responded to things and how they showed up for her. So I was thinking about that a lot, about like, what's this woman's journey? Where was she before this? And then also what kind of emerged for her, what elements of her own self that kind of came to the surface that she didn't know were there before.
Great. Revisiting one of America's darkest crimes, really, and most interesting, fascinating, of course, you know, why shows like this are made, the true crime everyone's interested in.
Mhm.
What was it like, and how are you able to kind of separate yourself emotionally from filming such heavy material where,
Mhm.
like the show's got a lot going for it, but at the end of the day, it's really heavy.
Yeah. One thing that helped is that Michael Chernus is one of the loveliest people on earth, and we've been friends for a very long time. Um, and he was always committed to the idea that he wasn't taking this home with him. So we were there for each other a lot. The company was a beautiful group of actors, and uh, we all knew from the beginning we had to be there for each other, that it was going to be difficult. The showrunner, Patrick, is a lovely, lovely person. And the whole kind of atmosphere on set was loving and supportive. And everybody was sort of reaching out to each other a lot. And that was unusual, honestly, in TV. Sometimes you feel like things are just moving at a pace and a speed that it's easy to kind of get sort of separate from each other. And we all really banded together. It was lovely.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Was there one day particular that stood out on filming? It doesn't even have to be about, the levity, but just is there one day
Yeah.
filming that really stood out?
Yeah, I mean, the day we shot Rob's disappearance, um, was the anniversary of the day it actually happened, and or the day after, and that really struck everybody. I think it was a combination of coincidence and maybe a little bit of intentionality, but it certainly infused the day with a really kind of a different kind of a shimmer, which was palpable.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, This comes out, of course, pretty soon, going to be out in broad audiences. What do you hope that audience members take away from this series? Because it touches on a lot of interesting topics, not only from, like the criminal system back then. We talked about grief with your character, these type of serial killers, but then also like these kind of the violence and children disappearing. Like, what do you hope people
Yeah.
take away?
Honestly, I think that one of the things I'm curious about is if people, as they listen to or watch more true crime after this, that they actually just think about the victims and their lives in a different way, that they're able to think about the person not just as a statistic or as the way they died, but give a moment to think about the way that person lived as well.
Is there anything that you think this series you'll always keep with you when going into other performances in your future career?
I think it was an interesting challenge because I've played real people in the past, and I'm if I ever play a real person again, which uh, these days happens more and more. I feel like something I experienced with this is because Elizabeth didn't have a lot of information available about her. You really made me understand a different sense of giving a real person that you might be playing some privacy. They
Right.
that allowing for that, and that it's not always about sort of harvesting whatever you can from a real person's life. Sometimes it's actually about affording that real person some privacy and just letting yourself create something that honors them, but isn't necessarily just harvesting whatever you can.
Right.
And that's something I think about a lot these days now.
My question leans more into just kind of the justice system. And I feel like in many ways, your character represents some of the challenges and the unfair nature of fighting for justice. And I was wondering if that's also stood out to you, maybe in the script and kind of what you're trying to accomplish within your performance.
Yeah. No, I think Tovar grows as he did in life, increasingly more and more frustrated with just how many blind eyes were turned to so much of this evidence that was just staring people in the face, and it was mostly because of once all the boys got pulled into this one kind of category, they ran into a lot of roadblocks. People were more reluctant to come forward. They didn't fully understand the they didn't really understand what this experience was. These young men were dealing with, and so I think Tovar became and it carried on for the rest of his life. He had this crusade, just to reclaim their identities, to discover their identities, to restore their humanity, because so much of that was stripped of them with these horrible acts that Gacy perpetrated, but also so much of it was stripped of them in the media and by law enforcement, and so I think that just Detective Tovar and all of his pursuit of not just justice, because who knows if that was even served with Gacy's execution, but the pursuit of knowing and naming them.